Hello friends, welcome back. It's Santosh Avsarkar again with PRED program, Insight Fellowship Program in Advanced Analytical Problem Solving Expertise. And we have initiated our first certification of Six Sigma Green Belt. In previous few videos, we have done with our first phase of Six Sigma, that is define phase. And in define phase, we have defined the problem. So what is the problem and where is the problem? Now we are entering into measure phase, and as name suggests, measure, here we are going to measure how deep is the problem. So without wasting much time, let's go and try and understand what are different steps associated with the measure phase. Next slide, please. Right. So we do have, we are done with the first few steps of Six Sigma. Define. We started with define. We had diagnosed what is the problem. We prioritized the problem. Then we documented the quantification of the problem and setting the improvement goal to project charter. Then we to locate the problem, we also have gone through high level process map. So these are the attributes or elements of the defined phase. Now we are going to enter into major phase. A very first step of major phase is defining how are we going to measure, the problem. And we're going to do it with the performance standard, the tool of performance standard. So let's get into the tool of performance standard. Right. So major phase. Now, before we just get into the tool of performance standard, let's somehow sum up with what are different objective of measure phase. Very first objective of measure phase is developing performance standard document, which we are going to look into it right now. Then fishbone diagram based root cause analysis. So how to do root cause analysis with the help of fishbone diagram. Fishbone diagram is also called Ishikawa diagram. uh, is going to help us or it is going to facilitate the process of root cause analysis. Do you remember we said y is equal to fx, y is a problem, and you need to figure out what are the causes behind that, specifically statistically significant causes. But to reach to the statistically significant causes, prior to that, we have to come up with the probable causes or list of probable causes. And that's where fishbone diagram is going to help us. Then next is, of course, listing of potential excess and prioritizing those excesses. So that's how we're going to do that with the help of CI matrix. Now, what is CI matrix and how we're going to prioritize it? We're going to look into it very quickly in upcoming videos. Then developing a data collection plan for both Y and X's. So we will cover that aspect. And finally, in major phase, we're going to establish the baseline process performance and capability. Now, what is baseline process performance and capability? We're going to look into it in detail into the step of capability. So likewise, we do have 5 different steps in major phase. So let's go into these steps one by one, starting with the performance standard document. Performance standard document. Right, so major phase, step 1, performance standard document. You can solve a problem only if you can measure it. As simple as that. If you really want to solve the problem, we have to understand how deep that particular problem is. So you got to measure it. That's what great Peter Drucker mentioned in past. So let's go ahead and understand the role of performance standard, in major phase. Right, performance standards is a document, which we are going to look into now. But prior to that, let's go to the introductory aspects. So define phase help us understand what is and where is the problem. What is and where is the problem. Major phase help us to know how deep is the problem. Performance standard is a one-pager document that makes problem more measurable. It makes problem more measurable. So what we do have into performance standard, it's just like a document. We had it in a defined phase. What document we had it in a defined phase? Project charter, right? One pager document. Likewise, performance standard is also a document. So it must be having its own elements, right? So let's look into it. So in other words, performance standard document answer following questions briefly. Question number one, what is the project why? That is, what is the problem we are working on? What's the project why? Question number two, elaborate project why by providing its operational definition. So what is the operational definition of project why? That's the extension of first question. What is the project why? Next question, performance standard document answer is, how are we going to collect the data for why? In other words, what is the source of the data collection? That's the third question we get an answer to from performance standard document. Fourth question, how frequently are we going to collect that data? So frequency of data collection is what the question will get an answer from the performance standard document. Fifth question is, what is the target to be achieved for project Y? So what is the target we normally say it, or maybe a client normally say it, what is that target of project Y? Question number six answers the question. It is the question. Do we have a specification limits or compliance ranges? So if we do have a target, it's client saying plus minus certain range, plus minus some buffer value. Do we have that specification limits, upper as well as lower specification limits, right? So that's the sixth question. And the seventh question is, how will we define the defective in a current project? This is perhaps one of the most significant underrated aspect of Six Sigma project. This is the backbone of Six Sigma project, this seventh question, because around this question, the whole Six Sigma project is going to revolve. So we'll get to know about defective and definition of defective on a next slide. So let's go to the next slide. The performance standard, if performance is beyond specification limit, it is called defective. So we are talking in a previous slide, the very last question, that is seventh question, talked about the definition of defective. So what is defective? So if performance for a given specific timeline or given specific time goes beyond the specification limit set by the client or goes beyond the compliance limit, it is called defective. This is an important aspect of any improvement project, as I already mentioned. Why it is important aspect? Because it helps us to get additional information, like next one, to understand how much is a pre-improvement percentage defective. So if we know the defective very easily, if we know the definition of defective very easily, we can calculate as it's stated. Currently for last 3 months, how many defectives were there? That is non-compliant units were there. That is non-compliant shifts were there, right? In the case of PT non-compliance. So current percentage defective we can find out provided we know the definition of defective. Say 10 defective units per lot, for second example. The next thing is, it helps us, the definition of defective help us understand how much is post improvement percentage defective. So we were standing here, after improvement project get deployed, performance will get improved, means number of defectives will get reduced. So if we know the defective, we can very easily calculate post improvement percentage defectives. That is the second thing. So pre-improvement, how many defectives we do have in the system, and after deploying the improvement project, how many defectives are now in the system. So we can compare these two things, and that's what the next point, to compare post-improvement percentage defective with pre-improvement percentage defective. So if previously we had 10 defective units in a lot, that is 30%, and now it is 7. From 10 to 7, we have improved, or we have reduced the number of defectives by 30%. Do you remember in our operational liver diagnostics, we set some, we try to find out what are non-complying units, or what are how many non-compliant shifts were there, right? So our project of process time non-compliance, we had close to 87 shifts out of 234 shifts in last 3 months, were non-compliant, means they were not meeting the target, means we had percentage defective of 87 shifts divided by 234 shifts, roughly 38% number of total percentages. 38% of total number of shifts were defective or non-compliant to the target, and then we set the target to reduce it by 20% from 87 to 70. So have we achieved that improvement? So our pre-improvement percentage defective or pre-improvement defectives were 87, number of defectives were 87. With improvement project, if we will reach to 70, to the number of non-compliant shifts, if you reach to the number of 70, so from 87 to 70, we have achieved 20% of improvement. Now, how can we reach to this particular understandings, whether we have improved or whether we have reduced a number of non-compliant shifts or not? We can do this based on understandings of the definition of defective. That is the power of defective. So the very last point over here, to infer whether any improvement is attained in a project or not, we have to define the definition of defective very clear. And that is why, as I mentioned, this is the backbone of any Six Sigma project. Hence, defective is a kind of medium. It's a kind of medium that validate whether we have improved or not. That is the value of defective, and where we define defective in a performance standard. And that is why performance standard is a very important document. A performance standard is a document that sets the direction of any improvement project. I think it's quite understandable why it is setting the direction of any improvement project, because it talks about the definition of project Y, then it talks about target value, it talks about definition of defectives, and thus it sets the direction. So where we are standing and where we're supposed to go ahead. Performance standard help us set that direction. It documents what performance standard do. It's document the measurable characteristics. Target, you can measure. Your major account, your specification limits, and of course number of defectives. Anything beyond the target, right? So those number of shifts that count, that measurability, it's what we get through performance standard. So performance standard is a document that do have measurable characteristics of the problem, like target, specification limits, defectives, and after all, when we have measurable characteristics of the problem, when we can measure the problem, ultimately we can solve the problem. So very first thing to solve the problem, all we need to do is we need to bring that problem into measurable characteristics. To solve any problem, we got to bring that problem into measurable characteristics, and the document of performance standard help us or facilitate the process of converting problem into a measurable characteristics. So that's about a performance standard. The very first step of measure phase is to document or to prepare a performance standard document. Let's go to the next slide. So this is how is the template of performance standard. You can see, we have 6 different elements in many performance standard documents of many Six Sigma projects. They may have additional aspects as well, or additional parameters as well, but these are the 6 most important core parameters of any performance standard document. So first one is project Y, second one is operational definition of project Y, then data collection frequency, how frequently we are collecting the data of Y, data source, so what is the source of data collection for Y. Here we are talking about project Y's data collection. Then specification limits and target value. Here you can see upper specification limit, target, and lower specification limits. And finally, defective definition. And here we can describe this. So this is a template what we have. Let's get into our case of PT non-compliance and try and see how the performance standard for PT non-compliance document looks. Next slide. Right. So project Y, what is my project Y? Processing time, throughput time, which is through, it is also called a throughput time. So processing time, non-compliance is my project Y. What is the definition of PT non-compliance? PT non-compliance means processing time non-compliance. So processing time non-compliance is defined as any shift in a day with average processing time more than 270 seconds. More than 270 seconds. If any shift, average processing time of any shift. So what is average processing time? So we have total time available in a given shift is 480 minutes, right? Then we convert it into seconds and divided by, how we are going to convert into seconds? 480 into 60 will give us a total number of seconds, that is 28,800 if I'm not wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So 28,800 seconds divided by total number of units produced in a given shift. Now, if this value for a given shift is higher than 270 seconds, then that becomes a non-compliance. So let me read it again. The operational definition of project Y, processing time non-compliance, is defined as any shift in a day with average processing time more than 270 seconds. Data collection frequency, every shift of the day. So you collect data for every shift for last 3 months, and then for upcoming months, you're going to collect data for every shift. Are you as a green belt going to collect it? No, you're going to ask your supervisor. That's why the supervisor in a Six Sigma project is very important individual. Do you remember in project team, we talked about the influence factor. What is influence factor in project team? The individual who do have authority to collect required information. So all these information, supervisor can collect with the help of assistant manager. So they will collect it for you. So for every shift, data collection frequencies, every shift we need to collect the average processing time per shift, and then we're going to compare it with 270 seconds, which is the target set by the client. And if performance is beyond 270 seconds, it is called defective. So that's about, we're going to collect it on every shift of a day. That's the frequency of data collection. Data source, data collection source will be internal ERP software. So many of the companies do maintain different software, so they need to just export the document from a given software, put it into spreadsheet for that matter, and then we'll provide you all these details. So that's the internal ERP software. ERP is enterprise resource planning software. So ERP software. I'm sure many of us have heard about this software. Many of the companies do maintain it. Now, there is a possibility that few of the companies are not using ERP software. They might be maintaining the details into a normal, simple spreadsheet. If companies are not even maintaining spreadsheet, very rarely you may find such companies, they are not maintaining the details in a spreadsheet as well. They might be maintaining it in hard copies, but companies do maintain all the details. That's about the metric which they normally do maintain. So in our case, internal ERP software, the company used to maintain these details, and that is why data sources internal ERP software. Specification limits, do you have? Now there is a possibility that client might give you specification limit, and there is also possibility that client do not give you any specification limit. So here in this case, client has not given us any specification limits. So any so-called buffer values. So your target is 270 seconds, spirit, upper specification limit 270 seconds. Lower specification not applicable in the project. Why it is not applicable? Anything less than 270 seconds is always acceptable. What is not acceptable is anything beyond up to that 270 value. So upper specification limit is applicable over here. So that's a 270 seconds. Now take an example. If you're talking about say quality performance, and imagine this is just another example. I'm deviating a little bit over here, kind of a project creep. So I'll not spend more time on that project creep, but I just want to give this elaboration or example. So imagine is PT non-compliance. Now is the project what we are just not talking about. But had we talked about the project of quality improvement, imagine the target set is 95%. So higher percentage of quality is better, lower percentage of quality is not acceptable. So if you really want quality as our metric, imagine, so anything beyond the target is always acceptable. So if 95% is a target, anything beyond 95% is good thing. So there we will not have upper specification limit. We'll mention there not applicable in this project. In that project, upper specification limit is not applicable. But lower specification limit, client might have told you that 95% is target, and I will not accept anything below 93%. Anything below 93% will cause penalty. The client is saying 95% is what I will accept, but anything below 90% will not be accepted. If client is saying that, there is a possibility that client says no way, 95 is a target and you have to give me 95%. No further deviation will be accepted. So in that case of the quality project, target will be 95% and lower specification limit will be 95%. So if we want to increase anything, we will have lower specification limits. Remember, like quality, we want to improve the quality. There we have lower specification limit. But in the project like reducing percentage scrap, reducing number of defective, reducing processing time, non-compliances, there we will have target and upper specification limit. Why? Because anything beyond upper specification limit is not accepted, right? That becomes a defective. So this is about the specification limit and target value. Now, sixth element is defective definition. So what is the definition of defective? We have already elaborated much on a previous slide about defective. So in the process of, in the project of process time non-compliance, the defective definition is any shift in a day that has average processing time more than 270 seconds is a defective. It's a defective shift. So out of 234 shifts, when 87 shifts were non-compliant, all it was meaning that those 87 shifts had average processing time beyond 270 seconds. And that is why 87 out of 234 shifts, 87 shifts out of 234 shifts are my defective shifts in this project. So that's the definition of the defective. So to just revise again, in performance standard, the six core elements are project-wide, then operational definition of project-wide, data collection frequency, how frequently we are collecting data, source of the data, then specification limits and target value, and finally, defective definition. These are the six elements we do have. This document, as we already mentioned, is going to set the direction of the project by converting the problem into measurable characteristics. And that is the power of performance standard document. Let's go to the next slide. Right, it's a quiz time. Very quick. Performance standard document measurable characteristics of the problem. Sorry, performance standard document. The performance standard document measurable characteristics of a problem, like target, specification limits, defectives, etc. Two options, true and false. True and false. So what is the answer? Simple. True. Performance standard document it document measurable characteristics of the problem like target, specification limit, and defectives. Answer is true. Next question. Performance standard document answers following questions. A. What is the project Y? B. What is the operational definition of project Y? C. How frequently are we going to collect that data? Or what is the target to be achieved for a project Y? Fifth, do we have specification limits or compliance range, that is plus minus over target, that range specification limit? And finally, how will we define defective in a current project? So performance standard document answers following questions. And three options are, it answers question number 1, question number 2, question number 3, and question number 6. 1, 2, 3, and 6. That's the first option. Second option, 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. And option number 3 is all 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the answer to this question is all 6 questions. The performance standard document answers questions of what is the project Y, what is the definition of project Y, operational definition of project Y, how frequently are we going to collect that data, what is the target to be achieved for project Y, do we have specification limits or compliance range, and finally, how will we define defective and current project? So it answers all 6 questions. Let's go to the next slide. Right. So we are done with defining how are we going to measure the problem with the help of performance standard. That is the first step of measure phase. In upcoming video, we will just go through the next step, that is listing out probable causes that lead to problem. So if you remember, we said Y is equal to Fx. If Y is my symptom, there are some causes behind the symptoms. And we need to list down those causes, those probable causes. That we will do, listing out the probable causes based on a fishbone diagram. So in upcoming video, we will look into it. So thank you so very much for your time. You spare in this particular video. If you like it, please press the like button. Please share it with your friends, and please subscribe YouTube channel of our Breathafix program. Please help us reach out to your friends, family, relatives, and your network. Let everyone get benefited out of it. So on this note, thank you so very much for your time. Uttishta Bharata. Ma Bharati shall rise again in a full glory. But before we end, we deeply appreciate following technology companies for their technological support. Thank you so very much. Let's meet up in our next video. Thank you.